Insurance isn't our only passion at UFG Insurance. We're dedicated to supporting the communities where we live and work. We proudly offer our employees paid time off to volunteer. Their work is making a positive difference across the U.S. UFG's Go Beyond Award is presented to one employee annually for exceptional community service. Striving to deliver on our promises is more than what we do. It's who we are. For a company promising community support, think UFG.
Hi friends, Angelica Vanetta, co-chair of Inclusive ICR. We are a coalition of over 220 employers in Eastern Iowa, all working together to grow the diversity and inclusion of our workforce, to create a space where employees feel a sense of belonging, included, and valued. Inclusive ICR is a proud sponsor of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion track of the Iowa Ideas Conference. As you participate today, be sure to connect with other Inclusive ICR champions, as we'd love to share information with you about our upcoming coalition meetings, projects, and how our work is impacting positive social change in our region. Be sure to visit our website at inclusiveiowa.org for information on upcoming events and to sign up for our e-newsletter. Thank you and have a great conference.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to DEI, Strain Within Immigrant and Refugee Families. This is the last session in the community track, as well as our last ones this year, intersecting with the diversity, equity, and inclusion track for Iowa Ideas 2023. I am so glad you joined us, and I think in a few minutes you will be too. We are in this session going to be talking about what transition looks like for our immigrants and refugees, the challenges that poses to family dynamics, how life in Iowa impacts their traditions, and how external factors might impact their stress, as well as the resources that families have to adjust to a new life here. My name is Elijah Decius. I'm a features reporter here at the Gazette, and I'll be the moderator for this session today. Before we meet our panelists, Iowa Ideas and the Gazette would like to thank our generous sponsors. This session is sponsored by UFG Insurance, Inclusive ICR, Cedar Rapids Bank and Trust, and ITC Midwest. Before we get into our discussion, I want to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves. Up first on our panel is Elizabeth Book. Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, everyone. I wish I could be in the same space as everyone, but this is amazing that we get to do it virtually as well. So my name is Elizabeth Book, pronouns she, her, hers. And I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager with the City of Cedar Rapids. I've been in Cedar Rapids since 2013. All of my professional experience has really focused on equity and inclusion and diversity with a Fortune 500 company when I worked at Collins Aerospace, to a very small nonprofit called Urban Dreams when it was here in Cedar Rapids. And now I get the pleasure of seeing this work through the lens of local government. So it's been a really exciting journey. I am also a child of two Mexican immigrants. So it's been just such an honor for me to be able to start to work on solutions from that lens of being able to understand like what individuals actually face when they're to a new country, and maybe what gaps and barriers there have been and how we can work to address some of those. So yeah, again, super excited to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Up next, we have Dr. Stacy Cole. Dr. Cole, tell us about yourself and the work you do over in Northwestern Iowa.
Hi, I am also very grateful to be in this space with you all today. I am the superintendent of schools for the pre-K-12 system in Storm Lake, Iowa. So I know on the eastern side of the state, not everyone always knows about the other side of the state. So just a little context. 87% of our students are students of color. 75% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. We're about 10% migrant, about 65% students that speak a language other than English at home. And we're very excited to be here because that's a population of students that we are very humbled to serve. So thank you for the invite today.
Absolutely. We also have Mugisha Glode. Mugisha, tell us what you do here in Cedar Rapids.
So my name is Mugisha Glode. Born in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and at age 4, left the Congo to flee the war and poverty and abuse that was going on. Grew up in Cedar Rapids, came to Cedar Rapids at age 9. Why Cedar Rapids? That's another story, all right? Grew up here, was homeless for a year here in Cedar Rapids. Was able then to get my nursing degree. And then 5 years ago, I started United We March Forward. And really the emphasis is really uniting the communities, uniting the resources, because I saw the possibility this here in Cedar Rapids, because that was an opportunity that was offered to me. And for me, it was more like, I want to be able to offer that to other people, other immigrants. Now we're serving about 3% of Cedar Rapids population each month. Really grateful for the growth and excited to be here.
Absolutely. Next, we have Henny Orr from Des Moines. Henny, tell us about your work there in the niche that you're bringing to this topic.
Yeah, hello. One of my favorite things about being a part of these is I get to meet such amazing people. So glad to be on this panel. My name is Henny Orr, she, her, hers. I am a 1.5 Korean American, born in Korea and came here as a baby. Grew up all over and moved to Iowa about 16 years ago. And 13 years ago, I was a co-founder and executive director of Embark, which is now Refugee and Immigrant Voices in Action. The name of our organization is REVA. What makes us different is that we are immigrant-led for and by immigrants, and we really focus on access and opportunities, but through leadership from within our own community and also through immigrant-led organizations. So one of our biggest programs is the AmeriCorps program, and through the AmeriCorps program during COVID, we were able to mobilize about 100 AmeriCorps members, 70% of whom speak different languages. So we started a helpline by language, and this is statewide. We have host sites all over the state. My personal background, I am an attorney by training, and I've been doing this work in immigrant and refugee justice work for over 20 years. So thank you.
Thank you for your service. 20 years is a long time to be doing anything. So.
Oh my gosh. I'm only 30. Can you believe it?
And we also have Mike Bonza on the panel. Mike is with Path of Hope in Coralville. He does a lot of legal work with immigration-related matters there. Mike is having some technical difficulties, but we hope he's able to get back on soon. In the meantime, we're going to just jump into the discussion here. Before we really get into the meat of this topic, I want to get a lay of the land and give everyone a chance to help put a dot on the map to show us where we are, because this is such a big topic. I really love the cross-section of this panel, and this is one of the beauties of Iowa Ideas, bringing so many different folks together. We have immigrants represented here. We have first-generation children of immigrants. We have folks that work so closely with this population on so many different facets. So this is open to everyone. Tell me what the transition to Iowa looks like for our immigrants and our refugees today. And I'm going to start picking on people. I'm going to start with, let's go with Dr. Cole first.
Oh goodness, that's a huge question, right? And so from my vantage and the seat on the bus that I have, when I think about our newcomers, I'm thinking about, kids who are aged 3 to about 21, right? And so when I think about the barriers, the nuances, all of those things, I'm probably thinking about much smaller things than many people on this panel, right? So the first thing that I'm always asking if we have a jump and we know that we're going to be getting a specific population, the first thing I'm always asking is, what snacks can we keep in teachers' desk drawers that will make kids feel comfortable when they're at school, right? And so we're thinking of very small things like that to very big things like where are they living? What support do their parents have? What access do they have to insurance? What access do they have to other things that have probably been promised to them as they've come to this country? Even with access, what does it look like to gain access to the system? So we've put in place some social work positions that help our new families get acquainted with all of the different systems that are in place in our state. And so we go from the very small to let's make sure they have gloves, hats, and coats in the winter, to let's make sure we have snacks that are appropriate and are comfortable to them, to the big, how do we get them access to all of the things in the system and help them through that process, right? I know I do have a doctorate, so I feel like I'm fairly competent in navigating a system. However, I have found that navigating the systems of different healthcare in Iowa is much more difficult at times than getting that degree. So helping families through the entire process is one of our biggest pieces that we get involved with.
Absolutely. Henny, tell me about your perspective on this. What is the transition looking like from where you stand for new families in Iowa?
Yeah, it was great to hear, from Stacy. When I think about transition, I think about systems, right? So if we're looking at a system that is not accessible, you're looking at like fruit that you can see, but you may not be able to take, and it's throughout. I mean, when we started REBO, we were working with newly arrived refugees, and I think that's a bit more stark and apparent in terms of the need when refugees from Burma at that time had been in camps for almost 2 decades and being served for 90 days to 6 months is really, appalling. To not have that kind of support. But I'm also talking about, immigrants too, who come here, who I'll give you an example. And Claire came to us and was an AmeriCorps member, and she had a degree from her country, and she had been looking for work for several years. And it was about the process of knowing who to contact. It was about how to do in the interview and the resume. There's so many barriers, and it's not just language. It's tied into discrimination. It's tied into lack of opportunities and social capital. And so when we're looking at this, I do think that looking at it from a systems perspective and a systems integration perspective, so that if we're talking about, hey, I want to have information to share with you, with the community, then the next question should be, is that information actionable? Can we use that information? Can we actually get that resource from point A to the end, where you actually end up resolving an issue or getting that resource? Is a question that I don't know if people are really looking at. That we're kind of siloed off, and we're saying, okay, well, we'll refer you. We're referring people to maybe avoid. When we say, hey, why don't you go there? It's not, there's no bridges, there's no path, right? So you end up getting to a place, and then you're stuck there, and it's a cliff. So during COVID, it was extremely stark. I think, it was really appalling, where people couldn't get basic essential needs. And that showed that the system truly, truly had these huge cracks. So that's just a little perspective.
Just a little something to chew on. So, Mugisha, you work very closely with so many refugees here, particularly a wide range of African populations new to Iowa and new to the United States. Tell us what the transition looks like for them at this point.
The transition is difficult. It's difficult. If you look at, immigrants who are coming in, there's different ways. So I came in, my father was already here in Cedar Rapids, so I came in on a visa with the family reunification. You have immigrants who are coming in as refugees. If they're coming in as refugees, they've been in camps for decades, as Henny has mentioned. If they're coming in as asylum seekers, if they're coming in lottery visa, if they're coming in spouse, if they're coming in a student, they're coming in employee. So there's many ways that immigrants migrate to the United States. But once they're here, there's a culture shock. There's a sense of, how do I support now my family, right? If they're older, they have to work. So if they're working, then what do? When do they get the time to take care of their loved one? Their kids are learning the language much quicker. So the children become like their advisors. So now you have a 13-year-old, interpreting about your medical issues, which you would never have done, in your own country. You have now children now making decisions for you. So, and then the education, if you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, if you're someone prominent in your country, you can't practice that here. So now you're working factories, you're working somewhere that maybe would not have been your preferred choice. The language itself is taking years. Then you're looking at, so I mean, there's so much. I mean, there's so much. So I think for us is how do we address the language? How do we address the transportation? Right? If we can help, if we can be supportive in the language, we can at least, bite into a little bit to some of that barrier. If we can support with the driver's education, we can give them opportunities for them to be able to go to a job that they prefer, go to a church that they prefer, really giving them mobility. And, of course, access to food, as they struggle economically, making sure there's a place where they can access food that is culturally appropriate for them, and also that is nourishment to themselves. And then, one of our goal was to have community gatherings. So we've created opportunities where we're bringing immigrants and non-immigrants together. So really sort of finding ways to bridge those. I've always been more like a solution-focused person. It's like, what is a solution and how can we create that? So, but the barriers, they're huge. They're huge. Even right now, as an immigrant myself, my grandma and grandpa are in Africa, right? I mean, there's a strain there. So even though I'm versatile, I know the language, but there's still a strain there.
Mm, absolutely. Elizabeth, you have a unique perspective in that not only are you the child of immigrants, but you work from a city perspective. Tell me, what things look like from your corner.
Yeah, definitely. So everything everyone said, I mean, I completely echo that. And it made me think of a lot of more things of like what we're doing here at the city. Initially, I think like the first thing that I think of when I think of immigrant refugees coming to the U.S. Or coming to Cedar Rapids is that sense of community. I think that's huge, right? When you're going somewhere, you want to be able to connect with people who share similar backgrounds or interests, or just have that sense of community. I think that's so big for just the mental health of those who are coming here, especially if they've been facing some really big things in their past. So that's a huge pillar of ours, is focusing on that community aspect, but then ensuring that we're letting those who are doing the work lead. So I'm thinking of like United We March Forward, right? I'm thinking of Catherine McCauley. Like, we are local government. We haven't really worked in that space before, and we don't interact specifically with immigrant refugees every single day, as a sole focus. So when we have opportunities, how can we lean on those expert partners to be able to create something beautiful and big? And so that's something that immediately comes to mind. But internally at the city, we've talked about our language access, and not only like technically, how can we support those who have a language barrier, but what, I think Henny or Stacey, Henny, I think you said that. So it's definitely, it is more than language too. It's like that cultural understanding. And so that was a big conversation that we had at the city with all of our departments is, what does it even mean to be an immigrant and refugee? What is that experience? And there's really no way that any of us, unless we've gone through that experience, actually understand every step, every feeling, every moment of that life. But we talk about, a lot of people here have moved, right? We've moved to a different city, maybe to a different state even. So imagine that moment, deciding to pick up and move. One, it's a decision, so that's already different, but moving to a new place, right? You have to have new furniture. You're having a new place to live. Perhaps you have to have a new car. So these are all of the things that immigrant and refugees have to experience. But then on top of that, they have so many other barriers of maybe they don't speak the same language. So that's, they're trying to find a new car. when there's a language barrier. They're trying to find a primary care physician. They're trying to find a new job. They're trying to find, transportation, a sense of community. All of these things are happening right at once. And it's so important for the beginning moments when someone moves here to be able to be as connected to some of these pathways as possible. And for us, so local government, we're trying to find the best foot with this. We're trying to figure out how can we be the best partner for some of the expert partners here within our community, but then also making sure that all of the wonderful programs and opportunities that we have are fully accessible. So we have really been working on our language access program, which we've been really excited about. And I think from Elijah, kind of what you were asking, the personal lens, and Magisha, you said this too. I remember being a kid and translating, for my mother, translating like official documents. And I was 10 years old. I didn't know what these words meant, but I did my best. And so, and being the translator in person for certain situations. So I always think back on those moments because they're still happening. There's still kids who don't get to be kids all the time and have to translate things for their parents or for, aunts and uncles. And so we really wanted to stop that necessity and just allow families to be autonomous and to be, what they're supposed to be, which is kids. So we've really been working on our language access program. Every single one of our departments has been fully trained on how to connect with Hands Up Communication, a local nonprofit here, for any on-demand interpretation services needed. So any person at the city can pick up a phone, can use an app on their city cell phone to video call or to audio call an interpreter at any time throughout their shift if they're ever interacting with a resident. So we're super excited about that because language is so important to be able to immediately respond to someone if they need that interpretation so they can fully access what we're, all the programs and opportunities that we're doing. And so it was a long process. I'm sure I'll talk a little bit more about it in some other questions, but I think that's the first thing that I always think of. It's like that community engagement piece. Like how can we help create that sense of community? But then also specifically with our role, local government, like how can we start? We want to solve all the things, but we can't. So where do we start and how can we do that?
Absolutely. And then Mike was able to join us and get through the Zoom firewall here. Mike, we'll go back to you. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about the work you do at Path of Hope. And then I'll let you answer the first question, which is what the transition looks like for our refugees and immigrants today.
Yes, thank you. And I apologize for the technical issues here this morning. My name is Mike Banza. I serve as the immigration attorney and executive director of Path of Hope. I've been there since 2013. We serve migrants from different countries. We provide services, immigration and legal services, and intensive case management to refugees who need help with employment or housing or anything of that nature. I have, in my experience here, have seen refugees, coming for different reasons. And I think that at this point where we are, the United States receive about 70,000 refugees in a year. And every time that happens, many of them come to Iowa for factories and companies in here. There's definitely a need for more resources because we end up having more refugees in Iowa, but we don't have enough resources to provide them with. And I think that if we can, there's definitely been an improvement in a way that, we've seen an increase. Back then, we never used to provide mental health counseling for refugees, and now we do, which is a great thing. But it doesn't mean that there's no room for improvement. We still have refugees struggling with transportations and things of that nature. So I think that we are headed in the right direction, but I think there's still more work to do in a way to facilitate a resettlement in America.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that almost all of you have, 5-10 years of experience in this field. That's a real wealth of knowledge to draw from. And so with that in mind, You all have elaborated on some of the biggest challenges that you guys are facing today. If you want to add more, feel free to. But what I'm wanting to know is how the challenges of today in the landscape of today compares to maybe 10 years ago. And we'll start with Dr. Cole on that one.
So I would say in some cases our challenges are very different, and in some cases our challenges are almost exactly the same as they were 10 years ago. So I think for us as a school district, this ebbs and flows a little bit as we see new populations of kids enter our school district. So when I think about a couple of populations that would have been considered newcomers in the early 2000s, they were facing the challenges of getting access to systems, as Henny said, recognizing where the cracks in the system were, right? And those cracks were very, very invisible to a lot of people in the state. And I would say in the early 2000s, a lot of people in my school community, that those cracks were invisible to them as well, right? And so we saw a lot less inclusivity, I guess is what I would say at that point. And so now we're able to recognize a lot more of that. We have a lot more people who sit in leadership seats that recognize the importance of representation and all of the things. We recognize who should be sitting on our school board, whose voices we should seek from the corners of our district. That being said, we've made a lot of progress, but we also have a couple of demographics in our school district that are still facing some of those same challenges that we saw 10 years ago. And so I think to Elizabeth's point, right, when you're a 10-year-old and you're interpreting for your parents, that's really hard. And we still see some of that in our school district, depending on who is the family that we're trying to serve. So we still have a few populations of people who don't yet trust the system. They don't trust us to help them in ways that are non-judgmental. I think once we get past once we get people to trust that we're not judging them, that we are here to serve, and that is our main thing, then we can serve people differently. But I think it does depend on who we're serving and what their specific circumstances are as to whether or not we have similar challenges to 10 years ago or new challenges of today. So we really see that ebb and flow with the populations of people that we are assisting at different times.
Yeah. How about you, Henny? What does today look like compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Oh my gosh, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis? It seems to change every day depending on what's happening in the federal government, what's happening here and locally and in the state. It's really, we're talking about a system of immigration that is completely broken and in different ways. I mean, we have people who are who applied for asylum and that are waiting years before you're hearing back, or I mean, someone who flees from violence, who are denied asylum because it's not considered persecution, right? Then on the ground, we're looking at, Afghan refugees who are coming here, or other immigrants who are coming here from other states. The majority are moving from other states, and they're not even counted, right? If you have resettlement, you come here and you get a certain number of months that you're served. For those who are moving from you don't have that place to get services. So it's very disjointed. It depends. It really depends. If I went to Cedar Rapids, I think maybe Cedar Rapids, I feel like would be a little bit more welcoming. And now that I know, Elizabeth is there, but you're talking about other places where people turn people away, even to get their child to school. Oh, they're over age at 17, they're 18, they can't go to high school. You see this all the time, and you see these big gaps. So that with Afghans coming here, and recently we started working with the Afghan community and helping them grow their organization called Afghan Partners in Iowa, because it is through a community that is empowered to help themselves that real change happens. And that resettlement for Afghans, if it was is a mess, right? I mean, it was just done without much thought and intention. And you have people in a unique status called advanced parolee, which is also another legal immigration. So what it looks like is something that changes, which is the way things go. But what does it look like here in Iowa when we're not able to meet those changes, when we're not able to be flexible and to adjust and to welcome and create that infrastructure and build that capacity before these things happen, right? Before we welcome Afghans here, because we're seeing housing. Housing is a huge issue. We're seeing people evicted. Why, right? Why are we still working on issues like essential needs, food, housing, jobs, when it's a systems? And we've known about these systems issues, and we have done really cosmetic kind of changes, I think. But there's been there's movement in places, and it's great to be part of this panel. And then how do we invest in those movements? How do we see that kind of mobility? So I'm not sure I answered a question with lots more questions, but there you go.
That's part of how it works here. Go ahead, Magisha.
I want to follow up on Henny there. Oh, so many good nuggets there, right? But what Henny has said, I'll just add on to it, just some other stuff. I think nowadays in this where we're at now, more representation. I think it's important having more representation of immigrants in different areas, because it's a big population. When we look at Iowa, I mean, probably when I first came in 2000, maybe 100%, right? All Caucasian. Now, I mean, Iowa's like 96% Caucasian. So there's definitely a population of immigrants that has been growing. But how are we providing more economic mobility for those who are here? Because when we look at there's a lot of talents that can be tapped into for entrepreneurship. There's a lot of talents in agriculture. We were able to collaborate with a partner here, and we did a little community garden. And there are immigrants who are wanting to be in the agriculture, but yet access to that. I mean, as we all know, agriculture it's hard, right? But yet we have immigrants who can help our agriculture system, but yet there's a barrier to go into that. But yet the community is here that can really be a benefit to those agriculture farmers who are immigrants. We look at employment, those who want to work locally, maybe in their profession that they did in their country, but don't have access to that. They don't have opportunities to be employed locally, work less hours and be close to their family. So we look at employment locally. We look at age. I mean, I look at it 2020 in 2000. That's when I came. But now I have a wife. I have 2 kids. Right. I mean, now it's like my aspirations a little bit different than when I first came here. So there's so many things, when we look at that, and then we look at the countries that they came from. There's other barriers and struggles that they're seeing. It's one of the reasons we also do, once a year we support orphans children in Africa. Why? Because we know a lot of immigrants, they're sending money in their country. So how do we, in the sense, this American dream that I've been provided, how do I make sure in their country they feel like they have something that they can protect, right? So there's so many. And then to follow up with what Henny was saying, I mean, I look at like the Afghan community that came, they had access to TPS, Temporary Protective Service, which allowed them to be able to work. We have people from Congo who are coming, they're becoming homeless in our community, right? And that's a strain on our nonprofits. That's a strain on our community. It's something we can fix. We can give them temporary protective service. It doesn't mean that they will stay here. It just means that. So again, there's so many things. I'm not trying to open Pandora's box here, but there's definitely a lot of things that can be addressed there.
Absolutely. Dr. Cole alluded to this, and I want to open it up to anyone who can speak to it. When we think about immigrants, we think about folks who are brand new to this country, but a lot of immigrants have been here many years and have lived in different parts of the country since they arrived to the United States. So just tell me about the dynamics of supporting both newcomers and folks who are still immigrants and refugees, but have been here a little bit longer.
You know, I kind of want to add on this because I think it connects with what I was thinking of in the last question as well. And I'm going to keep going back to like that sense of community and sense of connection. You know, I think people who have been here for so long, I love, Mike, that you mentioned this, and I've heard, you know, Captain McCauley mention this as well, and starting to see like mental health being more of a conversation within these communities because it wasn't before. And so, you know, for those communities, those individuals that have been here for so long and didn't have that support, you know, how do we start plugging the sense of like this is okay to talk about into those communities? I think that's super important, and I love that it's becoming a more prevalent conversation now. But even, you know, just seeing what's changing, and within the scope of people who have been here for so long or people who are just getting here, I think technology is a huge factor in this. Not only you know, technological advances that organizations can take advantage of when they're starting to look at systemically, like how can we improve what we're doing in a better way, and because we know nonprofits locally are spread so thin that there's just no way that they have so many things that they have to work on every single day, those immediate needs and concerns, that, you know, there's really no way to give them more time, right? There's only 24 hours in a day. So how can we start to use technology in our effort to help think about this in a larger scope, because things are changing so rapidly. But I think there's a sense of global connection now more than ever. I mean, you see this with social media, right? If you have family in different countries, like you're still somewhat maybe able to connect with them. I think culturally, this is something that I have noticed within my own culture of, especially if you are a child of an immigrant and you didn't get that full experience of your culture. There is a plethora of information on the internet through social media of being able to actually learn more about that culture and still have that strong connection with it, even if you are in Iowa, that is, you know, 90-some% not your culture, perhaps. And so I think that is something that is going to be really exciting to see for this new coming, you know, immigrant refugees of how can they still maintain that strong connection with their culture and bring some of those wonderful things here because we are so globally connected through a little device in our hand.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And I think that's a good segue to something I had planned to ask. People coming from non-Western cultures often have very different family structures, family roles, traditions than we have here. How do those structures and those traditions play out here? Is it difficult for families to balance honoring their heritage with integrating themselves into a new society where these traditions aren't recognized? Let's start with you, Dr. Cole.
So I was just thinking about an incident we had with the Department of Human Services, and they were working with a family, and we had some uncles show up at school to take the kids home, and we allowed the uncles to take the kids home because that's the family structure in the home. They live in the home together. That's, you know, that's their family. And we had just a little cognitive dissonance, I would say, with our DHS workers because they were upset with us because we had allowed the kids to go home with uncles who were not the guardians listed specifically on our student information system. And it really made me think during that incident about how much we have evolved in our school system, because it doesn't occur to us that the uncles are not family. Like, that is family. We know they're family. We knew, but THS really got after us because they didn't think we should have allowed the children to go home with the uncles. And so, you know, there's things in place like that, you know, we are constantly trying to navigate and, you know, not break any like Iowa code as far as who we're sending kids home with, but also supporting and recognizing that just because it's not in the white middle class dominant culture, that, you know, my uncles didn't probably pick me up from school, but I didn't live with my uncles. And so we're constantly trying to balance like rules and policies and how those rules and policies actually play out for our families. And we want to always make sure that our families know that our number one thing is serving them and serving who they are and not who some piece of paper says they should be. And so that has continued to be a difficult piece for us to navigate because we do obviously want to follow all of the rules and laws of the state, but we also want to make sure we're balancing that with serving our family as well. And so that is a piece that we feel like we're constantly having conversations about, you know, what's allowed, what can we do, what can't we do, you know, what's gray versus what is, you know, hard and fast rules. So, you know, what's within the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. So we have a lot of those conversations in our school district.
I want to hear from you on this one. You know, how do your clients balance honoring their heritage and their traditions that they've been with their whole lives with integrating into Iowa society here?
Did you say my name?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yes, I was about to say something about that. So I have faced several incidents where parents will come in and you know, present issues to me. You know, for example, a family from a country like Burundi where same-gender marriage is totally prohibited, and it's even considered a taboo to discuss it with your parents. And then coming here, their children are being taught that in school. And I've had to face that situation oftentimes and then, you know, have to advise the parents on what the best approach is. And it's always been this cultural clash, right? Because they're trying to preserve their tradition and that they grew up in and the traditional ritual. And they come to a country like this where, you know, we have somewhat liberal values that allow children to expand and express themselves in a way that they would like. And many parents have had to return their children back home to just have the early education there and then come back. And oftentimes there'll be this conflict in the family because, you know, children are fighting back and so forth. I've also had people, you know, present issues about, you know, female circumcision that is somehow accepted in their, you know, traditions. But in America here, you know, parents who is here, he's a little older and have children, and he's kind of, you know, advising the kids to go back there and then follow the traditions and get married to an uncle, for example, do some things of that nature. Then the kid will come and say, no, I cannot do this because this is not what I'm learning in school. So those cultural clashes do happen, and it's very challenging to deal with at times. And one thing I've always said is, you know, find a mentor counselor and then discuss it with the mentor counselor who will provide you with the best advice. You know, sometimes it's just hard to deal with those things. And yes, they do exist.
Yeah. Magisha, how about you? Do you run into these kinds of challenges in your work with your clients?
Oh boy. Where do I start? You know, like my father passed away about a month and a half ago in Africa, right? And so the tradition is where I grew up is because I'm the firstborn, I'm given a spear. And you talk about Wakanda, right? I'm given a spear to now say that I'm now like the man of the house, right? And I knew this, right? And in my mind, it was more like, do I do this? Do I follow this? You know, but it's a tradition that's really respected and honored. And in a way that I honored my father was, in a sense, know that tradition and sort of respect it, right? So yeah, I mean, you know, the thing is now I have a spear, and my younger sibling has a machete, and what that symbolizes that I'm now the as the oldest child, I have to protect the family in a sense. making sure the family's okay, and things of that nature, right? So that's a tradition there, right? But then, I think of, what Mike is saying, there's a lot that's going on. I think a lot of folks who are not immersed in the immigrant community, they only see the tip of the iceberg, but below there's so much more that is going on. You have certain, like let's say if a father, his culture was more like he didn't communicate with his female daughters, so for so long, that was a tradition, that was a belief that, as a man or as a father, he's not supposed to speak with his daughters. So he comes here, the daughters see a different culture, and now they feel different. They feel like they're not loved. They feel like they're not respected, right? Then I mean, I've had stories, I had folks telling me that their children, they're calling DHS on their parents because the parent is not buying McDonald's, right? Because the parent has chosen to make fufu or make, their traditional food. So the kids now, they're calling the police, they're calling DHS, saying, "Oh, I'm being abused." I'm not again. I was a healthcare provider and a nurse, so I know the DHS system, and I know the fundamentals and the importance of protecting individuals and making sure people are not abused. But there's a strain there, and how do you balance that? The different culture. And I always say, look at America 100 years back, and you will know where some immigrant families are at, right? Where there's still in a sense, they're families that love each other, but they have cultures, deep values. I look at, when a lot of immigrants, they don't get life insurance, right? They know that when someone dies, my family, my friends are going to come together and they're going to support me. And you'll see a lot of immigrants, that's how they unite each other, right? Well, and I think it's more of there's an individualistic culture and there's a collective culture, right? And here in America, it's like, how do you try to balance that? Where, maybe in the past, you have your grandma, grandpa, uncle, cousin all living together, but now it's like, no, that's not happening, right? But you have some immigrant cultures who are still, who are living that way, and they still value that because it's part of that family dynamic. And how do you balance that? I mean, it's it's a delicate dance. It's a delicate dance, as Dr. Stacy there mentioned. It's really the key stakeholders who are involved in those major decisions really need to find ways to find a middle ground, because my way or the highway is just not it's not going to work, and we're going to continue to destroy families and communities. And part of a growing community, a developed community, is really honoring that, right? Honoring that diversity, the inclusion, that equity. And when you look at that, it doesn't look the same, right? It never looks the same. So how do you find a middle ground to address things that are challenging, but yet so beautiful when mixed the right way?
I think that's very beautifully put, that, these things are not the way that you dress, the food that you're used to eating, the culture you come from. It's not just a cosmetic thing. It's really part of the fiber of who we are. And when you try to alter that, it has real consequences. So I'll open it up to anyone else who wants to add to it. Otherwise, I can move on to the next question.
I just wanted to add, when we're talking about how deep this question goes, it is about identity. It's about who you are fundamentally as a person. And I think as an immigrant and trying to find your place here, it's also generational. We're talking about, people who are coming from other countries not feeling like they belong as an adult. But when you're a child and you want to belong and you're bullied and you don't have the right clothes, You really want to fit in. That importance of belonging and identity is critical, and respecting that. And the narrative of what is right or wrong in terms of like parenting or teaching or loving. I mean, I've had conversations where kids have said to some of our staff members from who are refugees, she said, my kid came home the other day and wanted me to look at their homework. And I said, why? And then I looked at it and I said, oh, okay. And my child said, you're supposed to tell me I did a great job, right? You're supposed to say this. And it is. I think there's like we start to bifurcate what is good and bad, and it starts to pull upon that family unit. And like Mugisha was saying, the collectivist community, especially when you're coming here and you're seeking places of safety and belonging, is critical. I've had one person who was the emergency contact for 100 families at the school. Right. There's people who have all these children, but they were adopted, or uncles and aunts. I mean, and because we use terms like uncle, aunt, brother, right? It's much more familiar in that way as well. Personally, my parents, who are in their 80s, live with me. They moved in with me, and that wasn't even a discussion. Maybe in shock to my Iowan husband, but they said, we've chose you to move in with. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I win? But that's always a given. But my parents don't speak English, and it is mind-boggling to navigate the Medicare and the health system. So I'm so privileged that I get to take care of my parents. And that is something that that is always been something that we haven't thought, we never thought that otherwise, right? And it's different. So like, to find those places of understanding and respect, and we need more people who understand this. We need more decision makers. We need more lenses because if you don't know and you haven't lived it, then you got to find someone and others to be part of the conversation before you actually start to think through ideas. Because people are coming to us after the ideas are and say, what do you think? Well, I don't think it's going to really, we don't have the systems, again, the structures, the people to really understand and find these great opportunities to uplift our families within this rich tapestry and diversity.
Yeah, we have about 8 minutes left, so I want to use the remainder of the time to talk about whether our resources right now are sufficient, and if not, what they would look like in an ideal world to help folks transition. What should that transition look like for our refugees and immigrants in an ideal state?
If I were to say something, what I would like to say is the fact that many times I've had people who come to the United States, for example, as visitors, but they're applying for asylum, or maybe they cross the border, they're applying for asylum. The US immigration system now is making them relive the traumatic experience they had in their country before coming here. And what I've noticed that's causing even more stress and more trauma to people as they come into integrated to the United States. And it's a very, I understand that the asylum process it has to be this way to make sure that they only admitting people who have legitimate claim, but at the same time having to make a person tell you everything that happened to them that caused them to run away from their country and live here is very traumatic. And I think that if the stakeholders can consider perhaps revisiting that process, maybe eliminating the in-person interview and having them just provide documentation that wouldn't require them to live that kind of life again, it would be very helpful. And I think that's one of the things I wanted to mention. And if anybody's listening, maybe that's one way to help with migrants' mental health.
Yeah. Anybody else here? How could these resources improve to make this transition as ideal as possible for our immigrants and refugees?
So what I'm thinking on this is kind of like what Henny was saying. And Henny, I feel like I want to have coffee with you, like everything you're saying and everyone else too. But this specifically of, the people that are in place right now who are making the important decisions, right? There are so many great people who work for the city of Cedar Rapids, who work for, HSA and other entities that work, that their work directly affects or indirectly affects immigrants and refugees. And part of me, when I came into this role, is educating individuals of like the experiences that immigrant and refugees face when they come into the U.S. And this is something that I always hold in my pocket because I think people are generally wanting to do good, right? They're wanting to support other people. They're wanting to be neighborly to others. There's a small percentage, of course, of people that are completely against anything to do with DEI, right? But those are the bottom third. Those, people hopefully are not in big positions of power. Sometimes they are, but how do we touch the heart and also the minds of individuals who are currently in the place? So I think, kind of reminding everyone that we want to create a system and a place and a community where immigrant refugees can thrive as well, because we want to be neighborly to them, right? I think that makes sense for everyone. But then I always hold in my pocket as well that the U.S. is the #1 destination for immigrant refugees in the world. Like that is just matter of fact. And there's only so much of my sphere of influence that, whether I wanted to change that or not, that is just the reality of where we are in the United States. And so how can we move forward with understanding this reality? We understand that the U.S. is the #1 destination for immigrants and refugees in the world, and it is affecting Iowa, it's affecting Cedar Rapids. And if I am someone who doesn't have any, family connection with immigrants or refugees, but I have family myself, a big question I ask is, what kind of nation do you want to leave behind for your kids, for your kids' kids, right? If you are someone that is putting barriers in place because you don't want to find solutions to help immigrant and refugees find accessible solutions to live their lives normally here in the U.S., then in turn, you're kind of negatively affecting your child's life and your child's life, right? And so I think that really helps open the perspective of individuals who, for some reason might maybe not fully understanding, like, what is the impact of not supporting such a large population of individuals coming to the U.S. or to Cedar Rapids or to Iowa. But I think the community has so many resources. And so it's just trying to tap into all of those resources and just a way that kind of connects and helps individual families kind of not only meet those basic needs, but really thrive in this community. That's the hard part, right? That's kind of why there's a lot of people much smarter than me that have been working on this for quite a long time.
Yeah. We have about 3 minutes left here. I want to know what everyday Iowans can do to help their immigrant and refugee neighbors. Henny, earlier you said that so many of the changes over the last number of years have been cosmetic. How can we get past that? How can we help our neighborhoods, help our communities in practical ways?
Well, there's always, how do you raise your voices so that the importance of immigrants and immigrant issues and access is important? How do you perhaps help your neighbor in tangible ways? If you see something happening or if you hear something happening, how do you get involved? And if you're not sure how to get involved, ask anyone here on these panels, just reach out. but especially how can you invest in immigrant leadership and immigrant-led organizations? We are looking at people with tremendous opportunity and assets, and that's really the case. And by our own agency, by our ideas, and we can help, right? We're not, I don't think we see the need and how we can help, but we also don't see the promise is there, and we need to be able to connect that. There's a disconnect between sometimes doing for and doing with. And that's what I would ask. I would ask people to say, are we doing with the community, with their consent, with racial equity in mind? So how do you get involved? I would say there's a million ways to get involved. It just starts somewhere.
Absolutely. Well, that is our time today. It certainly has flown by. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface here. But I want to thank all of our attendees for being part of our session today. I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists for lending their ideas and expertise this morning. At this time, all of our Iowa Ideas sessions have come to an end, but the conversation does not have to end here. Soon we will have every session for both days of Iowa Ideas available to stream online. And if we gave you an appetite for more conversation, I would encourage you to visit our discussion board section on Whova under the community tab, where we can all keep talking about all these beautiful topics that have come up, and with little time to cover them here. Also on iowaideas.com, if you find the session in the list, you will see the names of all the panelists. There, I believe you can learn more about them and reach out to them if you want to talk to them individually and take more action in real life. Thank you all for engaging so vibrantly in making 2023 our best Iowa Ideas yet. Together, these conversations have ripple effects that impact what we do and make Iowa a great place to live and work. So with that, have a great weekend, everyone.